Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. The new report of the Larry Nassar case saying the FBI botched their investigation, allowing for more than 70 young women and girls to be abused. The gymnast now demanding action.
We know that what happened was extremely corrupt.
Britney Spears wins her bid to choose her own attorney.
That is what I think a lot of fans actually in particular wanted, was somebody in her corner.
The pop star calling for an investigation into her father for conservatorship abuse. Will the Tiger King regain his throne? His sentence on federal charges now tossed out. Shocking claims by the defense of an Iowa farm worker convicted of murdering college student Mollie Tibbetts. Should a new trial be granted?
There's something rotten in this area.
Plus, a jury now deliberating the fate of Mark Redwine. We break down closing arguments in the trial of the Colorado father accused of murdering his son. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. Britney Spears claims a big victory in court as a judge in her conservatorship allows her to hire her own lawyer. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with the latest allegations by the pop icon. Anjanette?
Brian, this is really something that Britney Spears wanted. She wanted to hire a lawyer of her own choosing. Her mother, Lynn, supported her in this, and so did the conservator of her person, Jody Montgomery. And Spears' new lawyer actually called on her father to resign from the conservatorship.
Hey, whoa, whoa, the conservatorship has got to go.
For months, Britney Spears' fans have flocked to the courthouse to support the Free Britney movement. This time, a victory, as the judge said Spears could hire celebrity attorney Matthew Rosengart to replace her court-appointed lawyer who resigned.
Her new lawyer, one of the first things he did was say, I think Mr. Spears should resign, on his own. And Mr. Spears has already come out, or his lawyers already come out and said that's not going to happen.
Britney Spears spoke through tears at the latest hearing, saying she wants her dad, Jamie, investigated for conservatorship abuse and that she is, quote, extremely scared of him, calling the arrangement effing cruelty. Jamie Spears' lawyer telling the judge that Spears made a number of misstatements to the court last month and said there's no reason for Jamie Spears to step down. Britney Spears' new lawyer saying they will seek to end the conservatorship.
So if she does indeed file a petition to terminate, I think it's very likely that Mr. Spears will, or his lawyers will, object to that, which would result in a trial. She actually has a right to a trial even by a jury.
After the hearing, Britney Spears posted a video on Instagram. She was doing cartwheels and riding a horse. She thanked her fans for supporting her, writing, "Coming along, folks, new with real representation today, using the hashtag #FreeBritney for the first time." Now, I reached out to the Ventura County Sheriff's Office. The New Yorker actually reported that the sheriff's office went to Britney Spears' home the night before the last hearing back in June because she had called to report conservatorship abuse. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office confirmed to me that they did go to Britney Spears' home that night, but they did not release that 911 call. So we haven't been able to hear that just yet. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Back with us is co-host Terry Austin. Terry, after Britney Spears' phone call into court, many in her camp jumped ship. What do you think could be the reason for that?
I think most of the people in her camp realize that she wants to be on her own. The manager recognized the fact that she's going to retire soon. And I think the attorney recognizes the fact that she wants someone who can advocate versus someone who is court appointed. So I think that the new attorney is going to move forward and is going to get everyone off her back and get her to be able to make her own decisions because she's absolutely competent.
All right, so Anjanette, now that Britney Spears has her own attorney that she selected, what's the next step for her and this new attorney?
Well, he said outside of the court yesterday that they still have to iron out some of the details of his representation of her, but he's going to represent her and he's going to seek he's going to try to get, up to speed on the entire case, which he has to do in a short amount of time because this is going on for so long. And then he plans to file to end the conservatorship. So we just need to wait to see how long that whole process will take.
And of course, we'll keep eyes on that because once they file, they'll have a plethora, a whole bunch of allegations that they're trying to support to get Britney Spears out of this conservatorship, and we'll make sure to have that for you next time. And now to a scathing report released in the Larry Nassar case. The Office of the Inspector General now saying the FBI's failure to act allowed some 70 young gymnasts to be sexually assaulted. The federal investigation finding the FBI delayed ramping up its investigation by more than a year, while Nassar abused more women and girls. According to the 119-page report, the Indianapolis field office special agent and another unidentified agent neglected to interview accusers, limited follow-up, and lied to officials to minimize errors.
It is about time. It is about time. We've been asking for that for so long.
Sarah Klein is believed to be Nassar's first victim. She's now an attorney and helped guide hundreds of young athletes as they face their accuser.
As you massaged the entirety of my 12-year-old body, suggesting that I relax as you slipped your adult fingers in and out and in and out of my body.
Nassar is serving a 40 to 174-year sentence.
This defendant has been brought to justice. I've just signed your death warrant.
Terry, this report is not shy about pointing out the shortcomings of this investigation. What are some of the bigger flaws in this investigation that you saw?
Well, the Inspector General report was scathing, and I think some of the biggest flaws was the failure to investigate. And even the small amount of investigation that they did not document. And I think worse than all of that is they didn't report it to local authorities, and they lied about that, Brian. So I think that the report rightly points out that there was failure all around as far as these local FBI individuals are concerned.
Absolutely, a lot of allegations and accusations, but is there a remedy to any of this? I mean, criminal charges, civil charges, maybe some people don't work at the FBI anymore. What can these women do?
Absolutely, there should be civil charges because at any point in time, any of these women can sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress. All you have to show is some documentation that you had some emotional distress, and they can certainly prove that and that it was either reckless or intentional. And the other thing, Brian, is I think the individuals, and the report pointed this out, the inspectors who were there and they were not actually investigating and lying about it, I think that they should be fired for cause. The special agent and his deputy both should be fired for cause. There's plenty of action there as far as that's concerned.
So potentially change of personnel as well as potential civil charges. We'll keep our eyes on that as that continues after that scathing 119-page report. Thank you, Terry. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the lengths friends of Robert Durst are apparently willing to go to cover his tracks. But first, the man convicted of murdering college student Mollie Tibbetts is back in court. Why his defense wants a new trial, next. Welcome back. An Iowa farm worker convicted of killing college student Mollie Tibbetts wants a new trial. He claims another man confessed to the murder. Christian Behena Rivera's attorney asked for a new trial after an inmate came forward claiming another inmate confessed that he killed Tibbetts after seeing her bound and gagged in a sex trafficker's home. An ex-girlfriend of the inmate reported the same confession to police the same day. The defense found out about the inmate's claims during the trial from the prosecutors. But prosecutors say the defense refused an offer to halt the trial so the claim could be investigated. The defense now wants to connect Tibbetts' murder to an alleged sex trafficker and the disappearance of an 11-year-old boy.
We have information that 3 people have vanished out of thin air in this small rural county. Mollie Tibbetts, Xavier Harrelson, and the woman that reported being abducted in May of 2018 and sex trafficked.
Prosecutors say the evidence used to convict the defendant is overwhelming and that they have no obligation to turn over new information post-trial.
We provided them enough detail that they knew, because Mr. Freeze told me in front of witnesses that what we were telling them was inconsistent with what his client testified to. We told them about the secondary location that she had been tied up, that another person that was involved, Mr. Freeze told me in front of witnesses that it was completely inconsistent with what his client testified to. And that's why we proceeded. They've got buyer's remorse when it comes to this information. We offered to stop the trial, to go to you and ask to stop the trial, to pursue the information that Mr. Mackey was providing to us. They declined. I left it 100% up to them.
The defense fired back, saying even more new information was discovered after the verdict, and that they did not receive the report of the attempted abduction of another woman months before Mollie Tibbetts was killed.
You bet your pants we would have said, stop, wheels. You run this down. Now they don't want to run it down. After offering it earlier, now they don't have to, they don't want to. There's evidence here that 10 kids in this area have gone missing. We've provided that. There's something rotten in this area.
Back with us is Terry Austin and Jeanette Levy. Terry, the fact there may be an alternative suspect is huge, but how is the defense arguing this fact in front of the judge?
I actually think the defense did a very good job arguing it in front of the judge. This team, Chad and Jennifer Freese, the defense team, they took turns arguing, and Jennifer DeFries actually just said that there's this new evidence where Arnie Mackey claims that Gavin Jones, another inmate, told him that he killed Mollie Tibbetts. And then Jennifer Freese explains, the defense attorney explains, that this is corroborated by Lindy Voss, who is apparently the ex-girlfriend of Gavin Jones, and that Gavin Jones told her that he also killed Mollie Tibbetts. So I think there's enough here. I do think that if I were the judge here, I would want to err on the side of caution, and this new evidence really should be heard just to make a determination that you have the right person behind bars.
Absolutely. You never want to get it wrong in that type of situation. And Jeanette, the prosecution is pushing back on a number of fronts. Timing of the disclosure, the defendant's inaction when they were first told. Do you think this verdict will be final based on what you've heard so far?
You know, I think it's really hard to tell. I think that what we've seen is we've seen some arguments in court. We've seen some things on paper. There will be a hearing on this, a day-long hearing, likely later this month, in which that inmate who said that the other inmate confessed to him will be brought in and put on the stand, and we will hear from him. That gives more time for the prosecution to look into this. But right now, they're saying, look, we got our guy. None of this fits. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. The facts are the facts, digging into them to see whether or not Christian Benejo Rivera is the actual person who killed Mollie Tibbetts, I'm assuming must take precedent over everything else. So we'll see how this continues, and we'll make sure to give you updates here on Law and Crime Daily. Thank you both. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, disturbing writings found in the diary of a teen accused of murdering his classmate. Plus, a big ruling for a big cat lover. The Tiger King's winning appeal argument and what it means for when he'll get out of prison next. We're back. The Tiger King is set to get out of prison just a little bit earlier. A federal appeals court has ordered a shorter sentence for Joe Exotic. Exotic was sentenced to 22 years in prison for a murder-for-hire plot of Carol Baskin. But on appeal, a 3-judge panel has now ruled the trial court erred, and he should have been sentenced to between 17.5 years and just under 22 years. The trial court will now have to resentence Exotic. He's being represented by attorney John Phillips, who released this statement from the Tiger King himself.
The witnesses that all want to come forward and have came forward, I'd like to thank them for finally having a clean conscience to come forward and admit everything what they have already admitted to perjury and what the government made them do to put me here, all for the name of the Cat Safety Act, because Carol Baskin made it very well known that she would help me get out of here if I'd support her bill.
Now to Florida, where new documents show a teen charged with murder made a stunning claim when confronted about the death of a 13-year-old girl. Tristan Bailey was found stabbed to death with 114 wounds in May. Her 14-year-old classmate, Addon Fauci, is being charged as an adult with first-degree murder. Investigators now say they found a notebook in his room with satanic symbols and violent drawings. According to court records, Fuqi changed his story, later telling detectives he was walking with Bailey, that she tried to grab him and he pushed her to the ground, causing her to hit her head. He's pled not guilty. And in California, a friend of real estate heir Robert Durst is being called to testify against him. Susan Giordano is accused of helping Durst flee before the final episode of the HBO series The Jinx aired. Durst was arrested in New Orleans in 2015. He's on trial for the murder of his best friend, Susan Berman. In court, Durst has been seen waving at Giordano and fist-pumping her as she left the stand. Prosecutors say Durst has given her $350,000 and promised to make sure she's set for life. Be sure to tune into Law and Crime Network for Gavel to Gavel coverage. When we come back, closing arguments in the Mark Redwine trial. Which side will the jury believe? Inside the Colorado courtroom after the break. Welcome back. A jury is now deliberating the fate of a Colorado man accused of murdering his 13-year-old son. Mark Redwine stands trial for the death of Dylan Redwine. The teen vanished on Thanksgiving weekend in 2012 while on a court-mandated trip to his father's. Redwine maintains his innocence, claiming that wild animals could have killed the boy after he ran away. In their closing arguments, prosecutors say Redwine killed Dylan in a fit of rage. The boy allegedly confronted him after seeing photos of his father dressed in women's lingerie and eating feces.
You heard Dr. Kurtzman talk about how there's a fracture to one's face that could cause a radiating fracture up into the head if someone is slammed into something forcefully, like a coffee table, or something is slammed against their head forcefully. And it's called homicide. And then the cuts. The defense expert, Eric Smith, told you these cuts seem to him, in his expert opinion, to be the result of slicing, cutting action. This defendant is guilty, ladies and gentlemen. He is guilty of murder in the second degree and child abuse resulting in death. He was the last person seen with Dylan. When Dylan goes completely dark and is never heard from again, he's in a living room with this guy. He's angry and upset and rageful. Dylan's blood is in his living room. He has the smell of a dead body in the same room, on his clothes, and in his truck. And he has Dylan's debit card. His changing stories and behavior are incredibly suspicious and evasive until you realize it's completely consistent with a murderer.
The defense disagrees and says this case has a lack of evidence, asking the jury to find Mark Redwine not guilty.
After 9 years, 5 weeks of trial, all this investigation, they can't tell you what happened. He said, can you imagine? Can you imagine if this happened? Can you imagine if that happened? Can you imagine if he said, F you? Can you imagine if he said, hey, shit eater? Can you imagine that? Or what if this happened? What if this happened? Maybe this happened. When someone's on trial for murdering their youngest son, and the prosecution's thesis is what if, or maybe, or can you imagine? That's a window into how weak the evidence is in this case. When the thesis of the government is, can you imagine? What if? Maybe this happened. When they're starting off with maybe, your deliberations end with not guilty.
And Jeanette, changing stories, potentially a strong argument by the prosecution. Did you think the defense had anything to raise reasonable doubt here in this consciousness of guilt argument?
You know, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, his behavior was just not that of somebody whose child is missing on his watch. I've said this many times before. You know, Dylan was a 13-year-old boy. He's still a kid, and he goes to see his dad for the first time in a while. There's hanging out, and then he goes missing, and the kid is nowhere to be found. So there is a lot of stuff that you can tie together circumstantially that does not make Mark Redwine look very good. I think one of the strongest things is that we still don't know exactly how Dylan died. They said there was blunt force trauma to the skull, but we don't know exactly for sure what happened.
Yeah, that was a big point by the defense, Terry. The what ifs, as we saw there. Lack of evidence may not be the winning argument here. What evidence is being tied to tie Redwine, to this murder? And did you think it was lacking, or did you think it was strong?
I actually thought the prosecution did a great job. I thought the evidence was very strong. First of all, the DNA evidence, that blood DNA that was found on the corner of the table, on the couch, in the house, under the rug. I mean, that says something right there. That tells me that there was something going on, that it was violent. And I think also this fact that Dylan was last with his father. That was the last person to see him in his custody, in his care, and he obviously owed a duty of care to his son. He's only 13 years old, as Anjanette mentioned. And I also think that because Dylan and Mark did not have a positive relationship, that shows there might have been some motive behind. And there's no question, I was reading some comments by some of our viewers that debit card, the fact that the father had the debit card, that is something that says, why are you trying to make access to these funds? You wouldn't be doing that if your child was missing. And he didn't really help with the search. So I think all of that put together makes a very strong case against Mark, and I think the prosecution has done enough to get a verdict here.
But Terry, just being devil's advocate, everything you said there was all circumstantial that did not answer the question as to murder. So how's that going to play out?
That's true, Brian, and all you need is one person, and there might be just enough doubt.
We'll see how that plays out. Thank you both, and thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.